Have you been stretching your hip flexors but not getting results? Let's talk about why that might be. We have lots of different muscles that can lift your leg, thus they're called hip flexors. And sometimes we tend to only stretch certain ones and not the ones that we really need to be focused on. So when I'm standing here, if I have tight hip flexors, my back wants to arch as my pelvis tips forward and my hip flexors shorten. And oftentimes we find ourselves stretching in this back arch position. To stretch the hip flexors, it's important that the back is neutral or even hollowed or flattened. So I'm trying to lengthen my lower back, find those lower abs, and tip my pelvis backwards to elongate the hip flexors. If you suddenly are finding yourself in a stretch and have a lot more mobility, it's probably because your pelvis tipped forward and you're now sinking into your back and not really getting the best stretch for your hip flexors. So let's talk about that in a couple of common stretches you might be doing. So one is the tall, grab my stick, tall lunge. I have a split stance position. I have a little space between my feet for balance. I'm not on a balance beam. And I want to start by engaging my core, tucking my pelvis, and squaring the hips. So if you're looking at me from the side, you can't see my back hip. Oftentimes we let the pelvis rotate, so now you can see my pelvis, both sides. I'm going to square that up. Square it up so my hip bones are level. And then lengthen the lower back, lift the abs. Think of like tucking your tailbone. Now from here, you want to challenge yourself. Can you keep that positioning? Keep your core lifted, keep your pelvis tucked as you sink down towards your lunge. You know you're in the right spot as if you can come close to the floor and you feel like you're being in a natural lunge position. So to strengthen this position, this is so much fun, in quotes, tuck, hollow, and just sink down until you feel a good hip flexor stretch. This is a great active warm-up. You're going to get a little sweaty almost instantly, and the fatigue is going to set in pretty darn fast. So this is a great active warm-up, but you may prefer the less intense version, which is on the ground. So oftentimes I see folks kind of like sinking forward. I have no ab engagement here. I have a lot of now folding and arching in my lower back. And I might feel a stretch, but it's not the hip flexor that's probably most problematic for your movement. So I'm going to come back, hip over knee, tuck that pelvis, square the back hip forward, and find your abs. Lift your core, lengthen the lower back. From here, push the back hip forward until you feel a pretty strong stretch in your hip flexor. All the while, you're working your abs, keeping that long torso. If you want to add more intensity, I can give you a lot of options. You could press your back shin into the floor. You can imagine scissoring your back knee forward and pulling the front leg back. This creates a lot of isometric tension. You're not literally going anywhere, but it's creating more muscle effort to put tension on the hip flexor. And as you get better at it, over 30 seconds or over multiple days or weeks, just keep pushing your pelvis forward from the bottom of your pelvis. Now, to add on, you could lift your arm, the same arm as the side that you're stretching, lengthen long up through your torso, and just be mindful that your back is staying flat. From here, side bend over the front leg. And then one more fun addition to add on, reach your back arm behind you and spiral yourself towards the front leg. Like you can try to reach towards the opposite leg. Each movement should enhance the stretch sensation. So if you ever feel like it's not adding on, then don't do that step or back off and reset, keep that core tight. If you want to come deeper into a more of a lunge stretch, totally fine. but still hollow your core, tuck your pelvis, and then push into the stretch. You're going to find a lot more intensity. So notice what happens when I bend my knee. This is the incorrect version. If I don't have my core engaged, my back is going to arch. You see the wrinkles in my shirt? Versus hollowed core, long lower back. I have much more hip flexor stretch. If I try to bend my knee, it's not going to go as far, but I'm going to get much more active flexibility here. Use that same concept in the couch stretch. For those of you who like the couch stretch, I love it too, and it hurts so good kind of way. So oftentimes I see this. I am not using my core. I have a lot of arch in my lower back. I do feel some stretch. It is doing something, but it's not doing as much as it could be. So if you come down, hollow your core, tuck your pelvis, and then walk back up, I feel a stretch much sooner. It's much more intense. Over time, I might be able to work myself up a little higher, and I feel it much more in my groin now. In this stretch, to make it a little more active, you could push your foot against the couch or the wall. That's going to engage the quad a bit to get more intensity on your hip flexor. And even more challenging, as you come forward out of it, can you lift your foot off of the couch or the wall? Whew, hamstring cramp is pretty possible here. If your hamstring cramps, just roll out and straighten your leg. And then if you work through those back and forth, that might create one, strength, but also active flexibility, aka mobility for your hip flexors. Give these a try and then see if your flexibility has improved from your baseline.